The heavy, humid air of Lagos always felt like a velvet trap, but tonight, inside the gilded walls of the Adenuga estate, the atmosphere was thick with a different kind of heat. It was the kind of heat that made your collar feel too tight, your skin prickle with anticipation, and your pulse race with a quiet, dangerous rhythm. Amara Adenuga stood on the balcony of her family's sprawling Ikoyi mansion, the warm breeze catching the hem of her emerald silk dress. At 22, she was the crown jewel of Nigeria's elite, stunningly beautiful, with flawless, radiant honey-brown skin, eyes that held the depth of the Atlantic, and a cascading crown of natural curls that framed her face like a halo. She was a woman born into billions, completely unaware that the very ground beneath her feet was being systematically rigged to explode. And the man holding the detonator was standing only a few feet behind her in the shadows. Jihyun Park adjusted his cuffs, his dark, piercing eyes locked onto the curve of her spine. At 28, he was a masterpiece of cold, lethal precision. Underneath his impeccably tailored charcoal suit was a body forged in the most brutal military training camps of Seoul, broad shoulders, a chest carved from granite, and arms thick with corded muscle. But it was what lay beneath the fabric that told his real story. Intricate, dark ink crawled up his thick neck, a sprawling dragon's tail peeking out from his collar, while sleeve tattoos of shadows and waves wrapped entirely around his muscular forearms, disappearing under his silver watch. Jihyun wasn't just a bodyguard. He was a mercenary, a corporate cleanup specialist hired by her father's most ruthless rivals to dismantle the Adenuga empire from the inside out. His mission was simple: gain Amara's absolute trust, compromise her security, leak her family's deepest financial secrets, and leave her utterly ruined. He was paid to be her shadow, and then to be her executioner. But as he watched her inhale the night air, the delicate gold chain around her neck catching the moonlight, a heavy, suffocating sensation wrapped around Jihyun's chest. For the first time in his career, the cold, calculating professional was drowning. In his mind, he had already mapped out 100 ways to destroy her. But in his blood, a dark, territorial monster had awakened. He didn't want to ruin her for another man's profit. He wanted to keep her. He wanted to lock her away in a world where only he could touch her, only he could hear her breathless sighs, and only he could possess the intoxicating warmth she radiated. The professional detachment he prided himself on had completely shattered, replaced by an obsessive, primal hunger that defied every rule of his contract. Amara turned slowly, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. When her eyes met his, her breath hitched. There was something terrifyingly intense about the way Jihyun looked at her. He didn't look at her like the other wealthy suitors who flocked around her family, offering empty compliments and polite smiles. Jihyun looked at her as if he owned her, as if he knew every secret she kept, and as if he wanted to consume her whole. Despite the sheer danger radiating off him, Amara felt a shiver of pure, unadulterated pleasure ripple down her spine. He was her protector, a silent, imposing guardian who rarely spoke, yet his physical presence was a constant, suffocating caress. Every time he opened a car door for her, his large, tattooed hand would brush against her hip, sending a jolt of electricity straight through her. If you are already burning to know if Jihyun will choose his dark mission or his forbidden desire for Amara, take a quick second to hit that like button, subscribe to Afrock Drama Tales, and leave a comment sharing what you would do in his shoes. Your support keeps these passionate, thrilling stories coming. Amara stepped closer to him, the sweet, intoxicating scent of vanilla and expensive perfume filling the space between them. She looked up at his sharp jawline, his full lips, and the dark hair that fell messily across his forehead. "Why do you always stand in the dark, Jihyun?" she asked, her voice a soft, sultry whisper that vibrated in the quiet night. Jihyun's muscles tensed beneath his suit. He took a slow step forward, invading her personal space until she had to tilt her head back just to look at him. The sheer contrast between them was striking, her delicate, radiant elegance against his raw, imposing, inked masculinity. "The dark is where I belong, Amara," he murmured, his voice deep, gravelly, and laced with a possessive undertone that made her knees weak. "But when I look at you, it's hard to stay in the shadows." He reached out, his thick, calloused fingers slowly tracing the line of her jaw. His thumb brushed over her lower lip, feeling the heat of her breath. Amara closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, completely unaware that this very hand had spent the morning preparing the digital files that could bankrupt her family tomorrow. Jihan's heart hammered against his ribs. He was playing a deadly game. The corporate syndicate that hired him was demanding results, expecting him to deliver the final decryption keys to the Chattanooga servers by the end of the week. But as his fingers slid down her throat, feeling the rapid, frantic beat of her pulse, Jihan made a silent, dangerous vow. No one else would ever have the power to make her tremble like this. He would feed his employer's lies. He would sabotage his own traps. He would play both sides of this corporate war, risking his own life just to keep her safe, kept, and entirely dependent on him. Later that night, the sky opened up, pouring a torrential tropical rainstorm over Lagos. Inside her private quarters, Amara lay awake, her skin flushed, her mind consumed by the memory of Jihan's touch. The air conditioner hummed quietly, but she felt incredibly hot, her body aching with a restless, deep-seated desire she couldn't control. Unable to sleep, she slipped out of bed, her silk nightgown clinging to the curves of her hips, and walked out into the dimly lit hallway. She didn't have to search long. Jihan was there, standing guard near the grand staircase. He had shed his suit jacket, wearing only a tight black dress shirt with the top 3 buttons undone, exposing the muscular hollow of his throat and the dark ink creeping up his collarbone. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, showing off the thick, vascular forearms covered in intricate, dark tattoos. When he saw her, his gaze darkened. The silk of her nightgown was almost sheer in the dim light, revealing the exquisite silhouette of her body. "Amara, you shouldn't be out here," he said, his voice lower, more dangerous than before. But she didn't listen. She walked straight to him, her bare feet silent on the floor, until she was standing so close she could feel the heat radiating from his chest. "I couldn't sleep," she whispered, her eyes locking onto his lips. "It's too hot." Jihan's jaw clenched, the veins in his tattooed arms bulging as he fought the urge to wrap his hands around her waist and lift her against the wall. He knew he was crossing the point of no return. He was her bodyguard, the man hired to protect her. Yet he was the greatest threat she would ever face. And right now, all he wanted to do was surrender to the dark, obsessive craving that was about to ruin them both. Jihan's restraint, a fortress built over a decade of blood, shadows, and lethal discipline, dissolved into nothingness the moment Amara's soft breath fanned against his bare chest. The storm outside rattled the glass windows, but the tempest brewing between them in the dimly lit corridor was infinitely more dangerous. He didn't drop his gaze. Instead, it burned into hers, heavy with a dark, terrifying possessiveness. Without a word, his large, heavily tattooed hand moved with slow, deliberate dominance, wrapping around her slender waist. The contrast was breathtaking. His dark, ink-etched skin and rigid, thick muscles pressing against the delicate, liquid silk of her emerald gown and the warmth of her smooth, flawless body. He pulled her flush against him, letting her feel the massive, unyielding breadth of his chest, the hard ridges of his abdominal muscles, and the frantic, heavy thudding of his heart. Amara gasped, her hands instinctively flying to his broad shoulders, her fingers digging into the firm, packed muscle beneath his shirt as a wave of pure, intoxicating pleasure flooded her senses. He didn't speak a warning. Instead, he guided her backward into the velvet darkness of her private suite, closing the heavy mahogany door behind them with a soft, definitive click that shut out the rest of the world. In the shadows of the room, lit only by the occasional flash of lightning through the sheer curtains, Jihan looked down at her like a predator who had finally cornered the only prize he had ever truly craved. His corporate handlers had demanded her destruction, but looking at her now, arched slightly against his touch, her lips parted in breathless anticipation. Jihan knew he would rather burn the entire world to ashes than let another soul touch a single strand of her hair. His hands, rough and calloused from a lifetime of violence, became instruments of exquisite, slow-burning torture as they slid up her ribcage, the intricate dragon tattoos on his arms seeming to come alive in the shifting shadows. Every brush of his fingers sent white-hot sparks through Amara's veins, making her whimper, a sound so sweet and vulnerable it nearly drove the massive Korean man insane. If the scorching tension between this ruthless protector and his beautiful target is setting your screen on fire, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Afrock Drama Tales, share this video with everyone who loves a dark romance, and leave a comment below telling us if you think Ji-hun can really save her from his own trap. Ji-hun's mouth descended upon hers not with gentleness, but with a fierce, consuming hunger that stole the very air from her lungs. It was an obsessive, deeply passionate kiss that laid bare all his dark cravings, a silent confession of the dangerous game he was playing. Amara tangled her fingers in his thick, dark hair, pulling him closer, surrendering completely to the intoxicating weight of his body, pressing her down into the plush mattress of her bed. The sheer luxury of her world faded away, replaced entirely by the raw, primal essence of the man dominating her senses. She could smell the crisp scent of rain, expensive cologne, and the distinct, intoxicating metallic tang of pure adrenaline radiating off him. His lips traced a path of burning fire down her jawline, lingering on the sensitive skin of her neck. His sharp teeth grazing her pulse point just heavily enough to make her arch her back, a soft, helpless cry escaping her lips. As he held her pinned beneath his powerful frame, the duality of his existence screamed in his mind. In his pocket, his encrypted burner phone vibrated. A silent, persistent reminder from the syndicate that the clock was ticking, that he needed to download her family's final defense protocols tonight. But Ji-hun didn't care. The professional coldness that had defined his life was completely gone, replaced by a chaotic, addictive need to possess her body and soul. He reached down, his tattooed fingers tangling with hers, locking their hands together against the pillows as he looked deep into her eyes, his gaze wild and predatory. "You are going to ruin me, Amara," he growled, his voice a low, gravelly vibration against her skin, filled with a dangerous, heavy weight. Amara, blinded by the sheer, unadulterated pleasure of his touch, only pulled him down for more, completely unaware that her gorgeous, heavily inked protector was currently rewriting the rules of a corporate war, swearing to destroy his own employers just to keep her safely trapped in his arms forever. The heat in the room was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket of pure, unadulterated desire that made every breath feel like a victory. Ji-hun's hands, vast and covered in the intricate dark ink of his past, slid slowly up the sides of her thighs, bunching the emerald silk of her gown higher and higher until there was nothing but the scorching friction of his callous skin against her bare, velvety warmth. Amara let out a ragged gasp, her hips arching instinctively toward him, seeking the heavy, solid weight of his muscular body. She had never felt a hunger this primal, this devastating. Every polite, well-mannered fiber of her upbringing was stripped away under the intensity of his gaze. He looked down at her with a dark, predatory obsession, his chest rising and falling in heavy, jagged thuds against her collarbone. The sheer size of him, the absolute dominance of his frame, made her feel incredibly small yet entirely worshipped. He shifted his weight, sliding one thick, powerful leg between hers, parting her thighs with a slow, deliberate pressure that made Amara's head roll back against the pillows. A soft, desperate whimper escaped her lips as she felt the hard, unyielding line of his thigh press against the very center of her aching desire. Ji-hun's jaw clenched so hard the muscles in his neck stood out in sharp relief, the dragon tail tattooed on his throat shifting with the movement. He was burning up from the inside out, consumed by a feverish, addictive need to mark every inch of her skin as his own. His fingers tangled in her mass of dark, natural curls, tilting her head back to expose the elegant curve of her throat. He leaned down, his lips brushing against her ear, his breath hot and ragged. "You don't know what you're doing to me, Amara," he growled, his voice a dark, gravelly promise. "If I start, I won't stop. I will take everything you have, and I will never let you go." Her response was a breathless, demanding pull, her manicured nails digging deep into the dense, packed muscle of his tattooed shoulders, leaving faint red marks on his skin. She didn't want him to stop. She wanted to be consumed by him, to drown in the intoxicating, dangerous aura he radiated. Ji-hun captured her lips again, the kiss deeper this time, wetter and infinitely more demanding. His tongue slid into her mouth, tasting her sweetness, claims of ownership written in every aggressive, passionate stroke. He brought one of his large hands up to cup her breast through the thin silk, his thumb sweeping over the hardened peak, sending a violent jolt of electricity straight to her core. Amara writhed beneath him, her hands sliding down his broad, inked back, tracing the hard ridges of his spine, feeling the incredible power coiled within his frame. If this intoxicating game of pleasure and betrayal has you completely hooked, make sure to show some love by hitting that like button, subscribing to A Frock Drama Tales, sharing this passionate story with your friends, and leaving a comment below with your favorite part of their intense connection. As the rain lashed against the balcony doors, casting dramatic, flickering shadows across their tangled bodies, the sheer adrenaline of his double life surged through Ji-hun's veins. He was playing a lethal game. Just hours ago, he had been a cold, detached shadow, calculating the exact moment to strike and ruin her family's legacy. Now, he was completely enslaved by the very woman he was paid to destroy. The thought of another man ever looking at her like this, of any corporate rival taking away the luxury she was born into, filled him with a dark, territorial rage. He wasn't going to let them touch her. He would feed the syndicate false data, disrupt their servers, and dismantle their operations from the inside out, using the very skills they paid him for to protect his gorgeous, unsuspecting target. He would play both sides, risking a bullet to the head, just to keep her right here, panting and pleading underneath him. He pulled the silk gown completely over her head, throwing it into the darkness of the room. Amara lay before him, a stunning, radiant vision of perfection in the dim light, her honey-brown skin gleaming with a fine sheen of sweat. Ji-hun's eyes dilated, his gaze sweeping over the breathtaking curves of her waist and hips. He looked at her like a man possessed, his hand sliding down to rest heavily on her stomach, feeling the rapid, shallow rise and fall of her breath. "You are mine, Amara," he whispered, the words a heavy, solemn vow as he leaned down, his lips tracing a burning path down her abdomen, making her entire body tremble with an exquisite, unbearable anticipation. Ji-hun's lips traveled down her collarbone, his hot breath making her shiver as his tongue trailed a path of fire over her smooth, honey-brown skin. Every touch of his mouth was a deliberate, agonizingly slow claim of ownership, dragging a breathless moan from the very depths of Amara's throat. He was completely unhinged by her, his hands mapping the soft, yielding curves of her waist and hips with a desperate, heavy pressure that left her completely defenseless. She arched up against him, her fingers clawing into the thick, tense muscles of his back, tracing the rugged landscape of his tattoos, as if trying to anchor herself in the middle of a beautiful, terrifying storm. Ji-hun let out a low, guttural growl, his massive frame shifting over hers, his heavy, hard thighs pinning her down as the heat radiating between their bodies reached a fever pitch. In the dim, shadow-drenched room, the air was thick with the scent of rain and their tangled, burning desires. With one hand, Ji-hun possessively pinned both of Amara's wrists above her head, his fingers locking around her delicate bones with a dominant, unyielding grip that sent a thrill of pure, submissive pleasure straight to her core. He leaned down, his dark eyes ablaze with an obsessive, territorial hunger that made her heart leap into her throat. "You are under my skin, Amara," he rasped, his voice a gravelly, raw whisper against her trembling lips. "I was supposed to destroy you, but instead, you've completely ruined me." He reached blindly onto the nightstand with his free hand, grabbing his encrypted phone. Without breaking eye contact, his thumb swiped across the screen, and with a single definitive tap, he deleted the final database keys that would have bankrupted her family, sending a corrupt, useless file to his dangerous corporate employers. He was throwing away his career, his safety, and his life, but as he looked down at the breathtaking woman beneath him, her eyes wide and glazed with overwhelming passion, her lips parted and wet from his kisses, he knew he would do it 1,000 times over. He dropped the phone to the floor, where it shattered in the dark, and returned both of his large, heavily tattooed hands to her body, sliding them under her hips to lift her toward him. The sheer, unadulterated friction of their skin meeting, the desperate, rhythmic rocking of their hips against one another, pushed them both past the point of sanity. Amara threw her head back, her voice escaping in a series of breathless, needy whimpers as he took her to the very edge of sweet, shattering ecstasy. his lips catching her cries, absorbing her pleasure into his own chest. They moved together in the dark, a seamless, beautiful collision of dark ink, golden skin, and a love so dangerously passionate it had rewritten their destinies in a single night. As the storm outside slowly began to clear, leaving only the soft, rhythmic patter of rain against the window, the screen gently fades on their tangled, sleeping silhouettes, forever bound by a desire that saved them both from the brink of ruin. If this breathtaking, intoxicating journey of passion, loyalty, and ultimate betrayal has captured your heart and left you begging for more, make sure to show your love by subscribing to A Frock Drama Tales, hitting that like button, and leaving a comment below telling us if you think Ji-hun's sacrifice was worth the ultimate risk. Share this thrilling story with your friends, and make sure your notifications are turned on so you never miss another dangerously seductive tale on A Frock Drama Tales.